I stood in the corner office, staring at Marcus Chen's smug face. For hours. That's all it took for the new CEO to destroy 12 years of my life at Vertex Media. 12 years of loyalty, 70-hour weeks, and building this company from the ground up, gone in 4 hours. Olivia, we're going in a new direction, he said, not even looking at me. Just scrolling through his phone like I was nobody. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why. But I just stood there, mouth dry as he continued. You're too old school. We need fresh energy. Security will walk you out in 5 minutes. 5 minutes? That's how much my 12 years were worth. I could feel my heart shattering, but something else was rising inside me, something cold and sharp. Marcus had no idea who he just fired. He didn't know about the 3 hidden external hard drives in my purse, each one containing months of data he'd never see coming. He didn't know that I'd already started planning my exit, just not like this. As security walked me toward the elevator, I made a silent promise to myself. He wanted to play dirty. I'd show him what dirty really looks like. 3 months before Marcus arrived, my original boss, the founder, David, had told me he was stepping back. David had groomed me to take over. I was supposed to be CEO. But then David got sick, and before any official transition happened, his board of investors brought in Marcus from some tech startup in California. A boy who'd never built anything real, who'd just gotten lucky with timing and venture capital money. I remembered watching the announcement email go out. My title stayed the same, VP of Operations. But suddenly, everything I controlled went through Marcus's approval. Projects I'd planned got rejected. Ideas I'd championed were killed or, worse, presented as his ideas to the board. That's when I started protecting myself. I began documenting everything. Every unethical decision. Every falsified report. Every time Marcus took credit for our team's work. The external hard drives became my insurance policy. I wasn't planning to burn the bridge. I was planning to burn the whole building down if I had to. Walking out of that office today, I wasn't just fired. I was free. The drive home felt surreal. I kept replaying the moment over and over, each time making me angrier. But anger was just fuel. I needed to think clearly. I pulled into my apartment garage and went straight to my home office. 3 hard drives. I plugged the first one in and opened the folders. Emails, screenshots, financial records, video recordings of meetings. It was all there, proof that Marcus had been systematically destroying the company's ethical standards and falsifying numbers to impress the board. But I couldn't just leak this. That would make me look desperate, like I was getting revenge on my ex-boss. No. I needed to do this smart. I started working backwards. Marcus had fired me because he saw me as a threat. That meant he was nervous. And if he was nervous about me, I needed to find out why. What had I discovered that scared him so much? That's when I realized Marcus must know his own company is in trouble. He'd probably already started covering his tracks, which meant there was a ticking clock. The investors would eventually figure out the numbers don't add up. I needed a new job first, a position where I could watch him from the inside, or at least stay connected to the industry. Then, when the moment was right, I'd move. The revenge wasn't going to be mine alone. The company would do it for me. 2 weeks later, I got the call that changed everything. It was Robert Sinclair, CEO of Vertex Media's biggest competitor, Nexus Digital. We'd met at industry conferences. He was sharp, ethical, and had always respected my work. I heard Marcus let you go, Robert said bluntly. That's the stupidest decision he could have made. I want you as our chief operations officer. Same salary, 5% raise, full benefits, and he paused. You'd have my ear on everything. I almost cried. This was perfect. Better than perfect. What's the catch? I asked carefully. No catch. But I'll be honest. Vertex is showing cracks. Some of our mutual contacts say Marcus is panicking. Something's not adding up in their financials. I wouldn't be surprised if they collapse within the next year or 2. My stomach dropped. 1 year or 2. I needed to move faster. I accepted the job that night. 2 weeks later, I started at Nexus Digital. From day one, I had access to Vertex's competitive intelligence, market position, and industry gossip. But more importantly, I had time. Time to wait. Time to watch. Time to plan the final move. My first month at Nexus Digital was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the crash was happening at Vertex, and I had the best seat in the house. Robert invited me to strategic meetings where we discussed market position. In one meeting, he casually mentioned that Vertex's Q3 numbers looked suspicious. Inflated revenue, suspicious vendor payments. It looked like someone was cooking the books. I said nothing. I just listened and took notes. That evening, I went home and opened my hard drives. I started cross-referencing the data I'd collected. Marcus had been inflating numbers. I could prove it. But more than that, if I dug deeper, I could show that these weren't just mistakes. They were intentional. Fraudulent. I created a separate folder on an encrypted drive labeled Project Exposure. I began building a timeline. Every single fraud, traced back to its source, with evidence attached. But I still wasn't ready to move. I needed to know who else was involved. Was this Marcus alone, or did the board know? Were there other executives complicit? If I pulled the trigger too early and only took down Marcus, the rest of the corruption would stay hidden. I needed names. I needed all of them. So I did something riskier. I called an old friend at Vertex, someone in accounting. I didn't reveal my hand. I just asked casual questions about how things were going. By the end of the conversation, my suspicions were confirmed. There were at least 3 other people in on it. Now I had targets. 3 months into my job at Nexus, I made my first move. I sent an anonymous tip to a financial journalist at the Business Chronicle. The email was simple. Vertex Media's numbers aren't adding up. You might want to investigate. I attached 3 pieces of evidence, carefully selected, so they'd lead her down the right path without directly implicating me. 2 weeks later, the article dropped. Exclusive: Vertex Media faces accounting irregularities. Stock drops 8%. The stock plummeted. The board launched an internal investigation. And suddenly, Marcus went from arrogant CEO to paranoid tyrant. Robert called me into his office with the news, grinning ear to ear. "Whatever you're doing at Vertex, keep it up," he said with a knowing smile. "It's working." I said nothing. Let him think I was just a concerned competitor sharing information. In reality, I was much more than that. The internal investigation would take weeks, maybe months. During that time, I had leverage. The fraud was real. The evidence was ironclad. And Marcus didn't even know who'd started the avalanche. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Marcus called an all-staff meeting at Vertex. I watched it through a live stream that a sympathetic employee sent me. His hands were shaking. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We're taking the investigation into our own hands," he announced. "We've hired an independent auditing firm. We're confident that any discrepancies will be explained by procedural errors." Procedural errors. That's what he was calling fraud. From my desk at Nexus, I smiled. He was panicking. That's what I wanted. The next move was critical. I needed to ensure that when the auditors dug deeper, they found something that Marcus couldn't explain away with excuses. So I did something bold. I sent another anonymous tip, this time directly to the auditing firm. I attached a single document, a bank transfer showing Marcus moving $200,000 to a personal account labeled consulting fees. There were no consulting fees. There was no reason for that transfer. It was pure, obvious fraud. The auditors found it within days. By the end of the week, Marcus was suspended pending a full investigation. The board replaced him with an interim CEO. The stock dropped another 12%. I was just getting started. Things escalated faster than I expected. The fraud investigation expanded. The other 3 executives I'd identified started turning on each other, hoping to save themselves by implicating the others. It was chaos. Glorious, beautiful chaos. But then, something scary happened. Marcus called me. Not through official channels. My personal cell phone. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Olivia," he said, his voice tight and desperate. "I know it's you." My blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. "Yes, you do. You're the only one who had access to those documents. You're the only one I fired who could have done this. And it's working perfectly, isn't it? You've destroyed me, and you're making it look effortless." I stayed silent. "Here's the thing," he continued. "I can make your life miserable too. I can tell investigators that you stole company data before leaving. I can claim you're behind this whole thing. It's your word against mine, and I have the board backing me. Do you? I asked quietly. They fired you, Marcus. You're alone. I hung up, but that call changed something. He suspected me now. I had to move faster. The endgame had to come sooner than I'd planned. The legal team at Nexus noticed the phone call before I did. Robert's security had flagged it during our standard monitoring procedures. When Robert told me, he didn't seem surprised. So you know him better than you mentioned, Robert said carefully. I decided to come clean with Robert. Not everything, but enough. Marcus was a bad CEO who made bad decisions. The board was right to suspend him, I said. And if he's trying to intimidate me now, that just proves he's unstable. Robert leaned back in his chair. Olivia, I don't need you to confess anything. But I do need you to understand that whatever you've done, whether it's sending tips or spreading information, it's legal. Fraud is fraud. If you witnessed it and reported it, you're a whistleblower. That makes you protected. He wasn't angry. He was proud. What I'm about to tell you is going to accelerate things, Robert said. The SEC is getting involved. They're launching a full federal investigation into Vertex Media. When that happens, they're going to want to talk to everyone who had access to the company's financials. My heart raced. They're going to call you as a witness, Robert continued. When they do, you should cooperate fully. Tell them everything you know. And if there's evidence you have, he glanced meaningfully at my desk, you should provide it. You're telling me to accelerate my plan, I said quietly. I'm telling you that the law is going to do the heavy lifting now. You don't need to hide anymore. The SEC investigation became official news. Vertex Media's stock dropped another 20%. Half the board had resigned. And Marcus, he was lawyered up, claiming innocence, but everyone knew the truth was coming. That's when I made my choice. I went to the SEC voluntarily and provided all 3 hard drives. I explained how I documented everything before leaving. I gave them the timeline, the evidence, the contacts of people who could verify what I'd found. The investigators were stunned. Most whistleblowers wait. I'd handed them everything they needed in one afternoon. Why are you doing this? The lead investigator asked. Because it's right, I said simply. And because I watched him fire me and destroy this company without a second thought. If I can stop him from doing it to someone else, I will. That night, the story broke nationally. Whistleblower brings down Vertex Media CEO. Federal fraud charges incoming. My name was in the article. The internet exploded. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. People started digging up old articles about Marcus, about his rise to fame, his arrogant interviews. They called him a fraud, a con man, a corporate criminal, and they called me a hero. The charges came down like a hammer. Federal fraud charges, money laundering, conspiracy. The other 3 executives were charged too, but Marcus faced the most counts. He could spend 10 years in prison. His lawyer called for a plea deal immediately, but it was too late. The SEC wasn't interested in a deal. They had everything they needed. I watched from my office as the news broke. Marcus being escorted out of his lawyer's office by federal agents. His mugshot plastered across every news outlet. The headline, From CEO to Convict, How Vertex Media's Boss Stole Millions. Robert called me into his office. The board wants to offer you a promotion, he said. CEO of our new subsidiary. Full authority. Full respect. I almost said yes. Almost. But something inside me wasn't satisfied yet. What about Vertex? I asked. What happens to the company now? It'll be sold off or liquidated, Robert said. The shareholders are pursuing lawsuits against everyone involved. Marcus will likely lose everything. Lose everything. Just like I'd planned. But there was one more thing I needed to know. 3 weeks before Marcus's trial, his lawyer called me. My client would like to speak with you, she said. Off the record. I knew I shouldn't. My lawyer told me not to. But I needed to hear it from him. We met in a coffee shop. Neutral ground. Marcus looked nothing like the confident CEO I'd known. He was hollow. Broken. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands shaking as he lifted the coffee cup. How did you do it? He asked quietly. I documented everything, I said coldly. Every lie. Every fraud. Every moment of disrespect. But why? His voice cracked. I gave you a chance to resign with dignity. You could have walked away clean. I leaned forward. I walked away with nothing because of you. 12 years, Marcus. 12 years of building that company. And you fired me in 4 hours because I was too old school. I paused. You know what the difference between us is? He shook his head. I built something real. You just took credit for it. So when I dismantled it, I was just reclaiming what was always mine. He started crying. Actually crying, right there in the coffee shop. I'm going to prison, he whispered. I'm going to lose my house, my savings, everything. My kids won't speak to me. My wife is leaving. I have nothing. I stood up to leave. Now you know what it feels like, I said. The trial lasted 6 weeks. It was televised. Every day, new evidence was revealed. Every day, my role as the whistleblower was highlighted. By the end, I'd become a symbol of standing up against corporate corruption. Marcus was convicted on all counts. 30 years in federal prison. The judge was merciless in her sentencing statement. You betrayed your fiduciary duty. You defrauded investors. You corrupted the integrity of a company that employees depended on. And when faced with justice, you showed no remorse until the reality of your crimes became unavoidable. Marcus's entire body went rigid as she spoke. By the time she said 30 years, he collapsed into his chair, sobbing. I sat in the gallery and felt something shift inside me. This was what I'd worked for. This was justice. But it wasn't just mine. Every employee who'd been let go during his tenure, every investor who'd lost money, every person he'd manipulated, we were all winning right now. I took Robert's offer. I became CEO of Nexus Digital's new subsidiary, a thriving media company with 500 employees and growing. The story of my whistleblowing became legendary in business circles. I got speaking invitations, consulting offers, book deals. Everyone wanted to know how I did it, how I stayed calm, how I planned so perfectly. I didn't tell them the truth, that it wasn't some grand strategy. It was survival. It was refusing to accept being dismissed. It was knowing that I was worth more than a 4-hour conversation with an arrogant man who'd never built anything. My first speech was at a business conference. 3,000 people in the audience. People asked me if I regret what I did, I said. If I feel bad about destroying Marcus Chen's career. The answer is no. I don't feel bad about exposing fraud. I feel good about it. The audience applauded. But here's what I want you to take from my story. You don't have to wait for justice. You don't have to accept mistreatment. And you don't have to destroy yourself trying to be loyal to people who don't deserve it. I decided to write a memoir. Dismantled. How I took down a fraudulent CEO and reclaimed my worth. Hit shelves 18 months after Marcus's conviction. It was a bestseller. In the book, I didn't hide anything. I talked about the documentation, the anonymous tips, the pressure, the fear. I explained my thought process at every stage. And I made it clear, I wasn't a victim who got lucky. I was a strategist who planned carefully and executed methodically. Some people called me cold. Some said I was ruthless. I accepted those critiques. Because I was cold. I was ruthless. And that's exactly what was needed to take down someone like Marcus. My book inspired a movement. Employees started documenting their workplaces. Whistleblowers came forward with cases that had been hidden for years. Corporate fraud investigations tripled in the years following my book's release. I wasn't just CEO of my own company anymore. I was the face of workplace accountability. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I got a letter from the prison. My hands shook as I opened it. It was from Marcus. Olivia, it began. I know I have no right to reach out to you. But I'm writing because I want you to know something. Your actions, your choice to expose me, saved my life. I read the rest of the letter, confused. In here, I've had nothing but time to think. And I've realized how much damage I caused. Not just to investors or the company, but to myself. I was so focused on winning, on proving I was better than everyone else, that I lost who I was. You showed me that there are consequences to arrogance. And I needed to learn that lesson. He went on to say he'd found religion, that he was taking psychology classes, that he was a different man now. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted me to know that my actions, while devastating to him in the moment, had ultimately saved him from a worse fate. I sat with that letter for days. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as manipulation. But another part of me recognized the truth in his words. Sometimes, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about teaching someone their actions have consequences. I didn't write back, but I filed the letter away and thought about it often. I expanded my company. We became known for the most ethical business practices in the industry. We had zero tolerance for fraud. We supported whistleblowers. We created a culture where people were valued for their contributions, not their titles or their willingness to play office politics. My employees loved working for me. We had the lowest turnover rate in the industry. And our profit margins, they spoke for themselves. How did you build this? A journalist asked me during an interview. By learning from my biggest mistake, I said, which was staying loyal to a company that didn't deserve my loyalty. I gave 12 years to Vertex Media, and it gave me 4 hours of rejection in return. I built this company on a different foundation, mutual respect. If I don't respect my employees, they leave. If they don't respect me, I restructure the team. It's simple. The journalist leaned forward. Do you ever regret it? Taking Marcus down the way you did? I thought about that letter. About Marcus in his prison cell, finally learning the lessons he should have learned years ago. No, I said. I regret staying as long as I did, but I don't regret justice. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, he was released early. Good behavior. Some reduction for cooperating in other investigations. He didn't try to contact me. I appreciated that, but I followed his story through the prison release forums. He'd rebuilt his life quietly. He was working as a counselor for white-collar criminals, helping other convicts understand where their ambition had turned toxic. It was ironic, really. He'd found redemption through the consequences I'd orchestrated. I realized something important. My revenge wasn't about making him suffer forever. It was about making him face the truth. And somewhere along the way, he'd actually grown from it. That didn't make what he'd done to me okay. It didn't erase the pain of being fired, but it meant my actions had accomplished something more meaningful than just punishment. They created the possibility of change. I thought about my younger self, standing in that office as Marcus fired me. I wanted to tell her, it's going to hurt. It's going to make you angry. But you're going to turn that pain into something powerful. And one day, you'll realize that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your former tormentor's opinion doesn't matter at all. By year 7, the impact of my actions had reshaped the entire industry. New regulations were implemented. Companies started taking financial oversight more seriously. Board members faced real consequences for neglecting their duty. And corporate fraud became harder to hide. I was invited to Washington to testify before Congress about corporate accountability. I sat in front of senators and explained how a single whistleblower, me, had been able to expose massive fraud, and how the laws needed to be stronger to protect people like me. What would you tell someone in your position today? Senator Williams asked. Someone who's discovered fraud but is afraid to come forward. I leaned into the microphone. I would tell them that fear is natural, but silence is complicated, and complicity destroys companies, ruins lives, and corrupts entire industries. Coming forward is scary, but it's also the most powerful thing you can do. The hearing was broadcast on every major news network. That week, 53 new whistleblower complaints were filed across major corporations. I went to therapy, something I should have done years earlier. My therapist asked me, "Do you think you've healed from what Marcus did to you?" "I think I've transformed it," I said carefully. Healing might imply that it's gone. But I don't want to forget. I want to remember it as fuel, as motivation to be better, to build better, to hold people accountable. That's powerful, she said. But is it healthy? I thought about it. I think it is. Because I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to prove myself to Marcus or anyone else. I'm just doing the work because it matters. And that was true. Somewhere along the journey, my desire for revenge had transformed into a genuine commitment to accountability and ethics. It was no longer about Marcus. It was about building a world where people like him, driven by arrogance and corruption, couldn't hurt people like me anymore. 10 years after my firing, I was recognized as one of the most influential whistleblowers in modern history. A documentary was made about my story. Dismantled, the Olivia story, premiered at Sundance and went straight to Netflix. It was nominated for an Emmy. I didn't particularly enjoy watching it. Seeing my own pain dramatized for millions felt invasive, but I understood its purpose. It showed people that they weren't alone, that standing up against corruption was possible. Thousands of people reached out to tell me their stories. People who'd been fired unfairly. People who'd witnessed fraud. People who didn't know they had power until they watched my journey. I responded to as many as I could. To each one I said the same thing. You have power. You might not feel it right now. But if you document, if you stay calm, if you plan carefully, you can change the narrative. Marcus showed up at my office one afternoon. Security almost didn't let him through. But I told them to let him pass. He looked different now. Older. Grayer. But there was something different in his eyes. Something less arrogant and more human. I wanted to thank you, he said simply. For what? I asked, though I thought I knew. For not killing me. Legally speaking. He smiled slightly. You could have. The fraud was massive. You could have built a case that put me away for 50 years. Instead, you gave me enough rope to hang myself, but not so much that I died. I didn't respond. I've spent the last 10 years thinking about you, Marcus continued. About how you stayed calm while I was panicking. About how you planned 3 moves ahead while I was still reacting. You're the smartest person I ever worked with. And I was too arrogant to see it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want you to know that your plan worked. Not just on me, on yourself. Look at everything you've built. Everything you've become. You didn't just destroy me. You created something incredible from the ashes of that firing. He stood up to leave. One more thing, he said. I read your book, and I realized you didn't destroy me to destroy me. You destroyed me to save me. I was on a path to complete moral decay. The law, the prison time, the consequence. It all saved me from becoming a worse version of myself. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about his words. He was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking of my actions as revenge and started thinking of them as justice. And justice, real justice, creates the possibility of redemption, even for someone like Marcus. I established the Olivia Chen Foundation for Corporate Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. We provided legal funding for people who discovered fraud but couldn't afford to come forward. We trained corporate employees in documentation. We created resources for people in toxic workplaces who wanted to plan their exits strategically. It became the most important work of my life. Because I realized that firing me was the best thing that ever happened to me. It stripped away my loyalty to a company that didn't deserve it. It forced me to find my own power. And it showed me that I was capable of so much more than I'd ever imagined. When I looked back at that moment in Marcus's office, when he fired me in 4 hours, I didn't feel victimized anymore. I felt grateful. Not grateful to him, but grateful to the experience that awakened something inside me. Marcus called me one more time. It was a decade after our last meeting. I'm dying, he said without preamble. What? I felt my chest tighten. Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors give me 6 months. His voice was calm. I wanted you to know because you should know. And I wanted to apologize one final time, properly this time, not in person. In a way you can hold on to. Marcus! Let me finish. I was a terrible CEO, a terrible mentor, a terrible human being. And you responded by becoming the best version of yourself. You didn't let me define you. You defined yourself through excellence, accountability, and integrity. I want people to know that. When I'm gone, I want people to know that Olivia Chen is everything I failed to be. He paused. I've already amended my will. The book deal I made, the proceeds are going to your foundation. You earned it by teaching me the most valuable lesson of my life, that success without integrity is just a longer fall. I cried. Actually, I cried. For the first time since the firing, I let myself feel sadness. Not for myself, but for him. For the person he could have been if he hadn't been so arrogant. For the years he'd lost, both in prison and in his own moral corruption. Thank you, I said softly. No, he replied. Thank you. For everything. He passed away 3 months later. 15 years after that firing, I stood on a stage at the Global Business Summit and looked out at an audience of 5,000. I was fired, I began, because my boss was afraid of me. Not physically afraid, professionally afraid. He saw that I was competent, that I was loyal, and that I was a threat to his position. So he eliminated me. I paused. Most people would have been devastated. Most would have fallen apart. I almost did. But instead, I transformed that pain into purpose. I documented. I waited. I planned. And I exposed the truth. The audience was silent. But here's what I've learned in the 15 years since. The most powerful thing I did wasn't destroy Marcus. It was refusing to let that firing define me. I could have spent the rest of my life as the woman Marcus fired. Instead, I became the woman who built an empire, changed industry standards, and created a legacy of accountability. I looked directly into the camera because, yes, this was being streamed globally. If you're being treated unfairly at work, if you're being disrespected, if you're being taken advantage of, don't accept it. Don't be loyal to a company or a person who doesn't deserve it. But also don't act impulsively. Document, plan, execute, and then move on to something better. I smiled, because the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's becoming so successful, so ethical, and so powerful that you don't need revenge anymore. You just need to keep building your legacy while they're dealing with the consequences of their own actions. The standing ovation lasted 8 minutes. As I walked off stage, I thought about that girl, Olivia, standing in Marcus's office, trembling as she was fired. I wanted to tell her, "You're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to change the world." I already knew that, because I had become her. And the world had changed because of what I'd done with that pain. The firing wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning.